Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning, wherever you are on the planet. And welcome to Milpark Business School's virtual auditorium for yet another inspirational webinar in our series on careers. And today our esteemed guest will navigate us through some of the myths and realities of career journeys. I'm your host, Kobus Oosthuizen, Dean of Milpark Business School, and joining us today is the acclaimed Andrew Main Wilson, Chief Executive of AMBER and BGA. Of course, AMBER, the Association of MBAs, and BGA is the Business Graduates Association. Important to note, friends, is that AMBER is the world's only specialist global MBA organization for leading business schools, MBA students, and MBA graduates. And AMBER accredits 291 business schools in 75 countries and also provides membership to over 60,000 AMBER schools as MBA students and graduates in 150 countries. Fantastic. And BGA, the sister part of the organization, launched in January 2019, is the organization's most significant launch in over 50 years, with 200 business schools having joined BGA in just 2 years, and the BGA champions practical, entrepreneurial, and socially responsible management education, offering membership, validation, and accreditation to business schools who can demonstrate impact and commitment to BGA's vision. And like AMBER, students and graduates of BGA schools are eligible for free BGA membership, something to take note of. Andrew was also chairman of the United Nations Prime, which, for those of you that are not au fait with it, the Principles for Responsible Management Education. He was the chairman for 3 years, from 2016 to 2018, and is currently chairman of Prime's Finance and Risk Committee. And colleagues, you'll get to learn more about his other fascinating achievements during his presentation. Andrew, thank you so much for taking the time out of a very busy schedule to share a few thoughts with us this afternoon. And without any further ado, I am handing over to you, sir.
Kobus, thank you very much for that lovely introduction, and good evening, everyone. What I'm going to do for 45 minutes, and then Kobus is going to take questions from you. I believe you'd like to post them during the presentation. So what I'm going to talk to you about first, and if Hanley, we could have the first slide, please. Lovely, thank you, Hanley. So I'm going to try and give you an insight into what I think is the global best practice in this whole area of, building your smart career and succeeding further from where you are today. I've spent time in 36 African countries, so perhaps particularly during the Q&A, we can take some of these issues very much in a South African or an African context. I'm kind of basing some of this on really my career as a manager and director, recruiting over 45 years since 1977 when I started my business career. I've recruited about 1,000 people, from junior staff all the way through to board directors. So together with my career experience, I'll try and give you a pathway to hopefully helping you find a pathway to your career. And I'm going to start with the 4 pillars of what I see as career development. Then secondly, the future of management. What are the key skills to master in 2022 and beyond? Then thirdly, the future of work itself. What are the key headhunters and recruiters looking for? And then finally, how you can build your own learning plan and career path, because the two really need to be in sync together for you to maximize your career. So thank you for that. Hanley, next slide, please. I firmly believe that there are 4 pillars of career development in anyone's life, and they are formal education, your career experience to date, your experience of travel, be it in your own country or worldwide, and what you've learned culturally. And then fourthly, the inspiring leaders who perhaps as bosses or peers have inspired you, or famous people that you've met who've proved an inspiration with great insight and advice for you. So I believe that wherever you are in your career today, at this stage, you should try and plan your career in broad outline as best you can for the rest of your career. And I'm hoping that this afternoon's session will help. The day I graduated in 1981 from Birmingham University with a Bachelor of Commerce degree, I set a key goal in each of these 4 areas. And I never knew whether I'd achieved them, but they were just a broad direction as a young 21-year-old. Firstly, in formal education, I wanted to be educated at the Harvard Business School at some stage in my career. Secondly, I felt even then I wanted to become both the chief executive of an international organization and a chairman of an international organization. Thirdly, I wanted to try and visit every one of the world's 200 countries in my life. And then fourthly, under inspiring leaders, I wanted to meet and interview live or film the 10 people in life I most admired most. And I'll share some of that journey with you now. Hanny, next slide, please. So my own education path, I went to a school called Dulwich College in London. I then did a Bachelor of Commerce degree at the University of Birmingham in the Midlands in Britain. And then I did the CEO 3-month program at the Harvard Business School, just as I was about to become a CEO. And I passionately believe that one of the best things you've done is make the best investment possible in your business career, which is to get a great degree, be it a business undergraduate degree at Milpark or an MBA at Milpark. This is a decision you've made to invest in your future, and it's absolutely the right thing to do. But what I would say, and we'll come on to it, is don't stop at your first degree or your master's. You've got the rest of your working life, which may well be from the age of where you are now in your early 20s to some of you in your 40s and 50s, all the way through until you're 70. And it's all about staying relevant year by year to improve your employability and your candidacy. And rest assured that in all my experience, the fact that you are at a business school now gives you a huge advantage over people who've not been lucky enough to get a first degree in business or a master's in business. It's all now about meticulously planning your career and making that advantage count from the outset. Thank you. Next slide, please, Hanley. So just very briefly, my own career. As you can see from this list, I've worked for 4 major multinationals and then followed by 3 international membership organizations. So I started with major multinationals, got to a director level at Thomas Cook and Citibank Diners Club International, and then wanted to work for smaller but still global companies as COO or CEO. So that was my career path. And the one thing I'll say is, although you set out quite rightly to have a broad plan for your career, I guarantee you that the detail of where you'll end up will never be where you planned. But by having a broad career and timescales, you maximize your chances of fulfilling whatever career ambitions that you have. For example, when I was at the Harvard Business School, I never realized that 15 years later, I'd be running an organization that services and supports business schools worldwide. So you can't always plan the journey. And next slide, please, Hanley. So on the travel side, I've always been passionate about travel, and you can see that I started my career in the travel industry with TUI and Thomas Cook. But I'm also a professional photographer, and I wanted to try and become the first person in history to visit every country in the world, but more than that, tell the story in images and words of the 500 greatest travel experiences on Earth. And I was going really well until COVID came at 178 countries. And I was just saying to Cobus that in January 2020, I was in Iraq. And in February 2020, I was in Eritrea. Because of COVID, I haven't been anywhere else since. But what I believe this does for you, your travels are much more useful in your career than you'd perhaps realize, because they give you a cultural understanding of all sorts of people from many countries and many different communities that dovetail very nicely with your career, particularly if you have ambitions to work in international markets or for an international company. And certainly I would say that my travel experience of these 4 pillars has been as valuable in my career as any of the other elements of it. Thank you. Next slide, please, Hanley. Then also when I was 21, I thought, who will my heroes in life be over the next 20 or 30 years? And that I would love to meet them. But more to the point, if I could meet them and interview them, what would be the one thing, the one really deep thing that I could learn from each of them in terms of life's experience and advice? And I set out to take on my hero or heroine in 10 different categories. And I've been very fortunate that I've either interviewed at live events or filmed interviews for broadcast with all 10 of these wonderful people. I mean, sadly, and it shows how life moves very quickly, 6 of these 10, of course, are now no longer with us. Most recently, of course, the wonderful, the magical Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And one of the greatest privileges I've had in life is spending a whole morning filming an interview with Desmond. So I tried to work out what was the one significant thing that I could learn from each person. And by way of example, I think it's very insightful for today, for your own thinking. From Bill Gates, the one thing I took that Bill's advice gave me is, what is the one thing in life you're most passionate about? The one thing that you're constantly fiddling with and thinking about? If you want a really fulfilling career, try and see if you can make your biggest passion and possibly your biggest skill your career. From Lady Thatcher, I spoke to her about the Falklands War against Argentina. And it was she gave me her last ever filmed interview before she died. And what really came across with Lady Thatcher was her sheer determination against all odds to win a war some 6,000 miles away, and her unwavering belief in that whatever anyone else thought, she felt she was doing the right thing. Always follow through with what you passionately believe is right. And from Desmond, we talked about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and he talked very emotionally about the importance of trying to forgive some people and giving people a second chance in life. From Buzz Aldrin, the second man on the moon after Neil Armstrong, he taught me about overcoming the fear of going into the unknown, whether it's in business or in space, and conquering that fear with the excitement of exploring beyond the realms of normal life. And for Jonah Lomu, the world's greatest rugby player, he reassured me that even if you come from a very tough background, if you're determined enough, you can still make it. And Jonah told me the story about how he regularly used to get stabbed as a child, and how his in a fight, his cousin was decapitated. And still Jonah came from that background with the support, particularly of his mum, and became such an amazing all-black rugby player, and arguably the greatest rugby player of all time. The other thing that I realized from these 10 is, in terms of developing your career, nothing is easy and nothing is given to you, because 9 of these 10, I clearly realized, were workaholics of what they did. They put in every effort to try and be the best. And in fact, the only one of these who was naturally gifted and didn't need to try that hard was the charismatic footballer George Best. But all the others have put their life and soul into their careers. So rest assured that people just aren't gifted great success. Everyone has to work at it. Thank you. Next slide, please, Hanley. And these are just some of the stills of my wonderful times with 6 of those 10. Okay, next slide, please, Hanley. So now we'll come on to the future of management and what I've seen and believe that today are the key skills to master. And the first one of them all is persistence and determination. Without that, you can be the smartest person on the block. You can have great talent, but persistence is the single most important skill. And I just talked to you about the first great leader who had an influence on me in business. Next slide, please, Hanley. When I was 18, I took a gap year before going to university, and I was just a kid. I was completely commercially naive. But to show how long ago this was 1977. There was a restaurant chain that came over to Europe from America called McDonald's, and they opened their first store in central London. And within 6 weeks, it had become the second busiest McDonald's in the world. And they gave me a chance as an 18-year-old kid to be the assistant manager in my gap year. And the founder of McDonald's, the legendary Ray Kroc, who'd built one of the biggest retail empires of them all, used to fly over to London in his private jet just to come to this store because it was his first and biggest store in the UK. And he'd come into the restaurant in a smart suit and tie, and he'd cook hamburgers with me and my staff. And he had a solid silver spatula. And I just watched his meticulous level of detail. A guy who owned one of the top American football teams, flew across the Atlantic in his own private jet, still worked at the detail. And he said to me, he said, Andrew, the biggest thing in life to succeed in business is persistence. He said, I've met many smart people who are brilliantly educated, who have all the charm and much more charming and more intelligent than I am, but nobody I've ever met has my determination to succeed. And I think that's very true today, because if I look at the people I put in key jobs in all the roles I've had, I put the people with the most determination and persistence to achieve in the most difficult jobs, because they're the ones that have got the tenacity and determination to see through difficult tasks. And therefore, they're almost certainly your most important employees. And the great thing about persistence is it doesn't matter what class you were, what education you had, how much money you've got. Everyone starts out on an equal footing as to their level of persistence and determination. So I think that's the first and number one quality. Thank you. Next slide. Next point, please. The second thing I think you need to determine is your own leadership style. What is your leadership style? And the one thing employers say to me about MBAs is every MBA we meet that we knew before they did their MBA has come out a better manager and a better leader by and large than they were before. They're better at finance, better at strategy, better at HR, better at IT, because they've been to a good business school. The one area where maybe they've gone slightly backwards is because of the sheer confidence an MBA gives them, they've become a bit more dictatorial in style. And in 2022, I can assure you that employers are looking for someone who is a persuasive leader rather than a dictatorial leader. And that comes down to inspiring and persuading people so that they want to do things and follow you rather than they feel that they have to do things and follow you. And if you're not a natural good communicator with people at all levels, and you know, many of us aren't, let's be honest, it will now impact your career progress, however good your technical skills. And therefore, I'd strongly advise that you speak to your business school or your organization and invest in some skillful coaching in soft skills development to enhance and improve your leadership style. Next point, Hanley. Thirdly, and this is a huge advantage if you're an MBA, in an ever more increasingly complex and uncertain world, as business decisions become more complex, so you need greater brains and greater versatility in thinking to solve problems. And that distinguishes someone who's probably going to get into senior management from someone who's a good operator, but maybe cannot take on the next level of complexity. And it's a great skill of MBAs because of the intelligence you have, the ambition you've shown in getting an MBA, but also the multiple skills in reasoning and thinking and case studies that you learn as an MBA. And this is a huge reason, I think, why so many MBAs are employed by top consultancies, because of their ability to complex problem solve. It's another reason why I feel you should think carefully before you change industries in your career. if you've built up a lot of knowledge in your industry and or your company, think carefully before going somewhere new where you've got to build up all that existing knowledge that may have taken years for you to accumulate in your current role. Because however bright you are at problem solving, your knowledge and expertise within your industry or sector is key to coming up with the right solution. And I experienced this myself when I left the travel industry as commercial and marketing director of Thomas Cook, and went to Citibank Diners Club in financial services as sales and marketing director for Europe. I transferred all my skills, but I had to very quickly learn the new industry of financial services, which is very different to the travel industry. And whilst it was great to get extra experience, it probably put me back 18 months in terms of career development. So just think, do you really want to change industries? Is it the right thing to do? Next point, please, Hanley. Fourthly, and this is a rare skill amongst many business people, genuine creativity. And by creativity, I particularly mean original thinking. And if you love art or photography or literature, I'd really encourage you to indulge yourself in that passion still, because it can be much more helpful in your business career than you perhaps realize. Because if you can combine original thinking and ideas generation with commercial acumen, you've got someone who's probably going to come up with viable innovation and new product development. And that is a rare skill. Next point, please, Hanley. So by way of example myself, I do a series for Nikon called Andrew Main Wilson's World of Wonders. And what I do is I take one image I've shot from every country in the world and do a double-page spread magazine article on the story behind that image in that country. And I would hope to end up with 200 of these. And I find that really helps me in my career because it stimulates the creative side of me. I'm probably 50% creative, 50% commercial. And it saves me, funnily enough, going stale on the commercial side by just keeping my creative side and ideas generation going. So I would really encourage you to nurture your creative side as much as you can, particularly when organizations more than ever before are looking for creative, new, viable ideas when markets are changing faster and faster. So I quote an example for Amber and BGA today. We are with our schools with a market leader in Russia and the market leader in Ukraine. And so I'm sitting down while this terrible tragedy unfolds with my senior team, looking for ideas saying, we'll stay very loyal to our Ukrainian schools. We understand that this is not of our Russian schools making, and that we believe that the business school community and the business school student and graduate community is key to working together for world peace. But just in case this war, and hopefully it doesn't, but if this war drags on and gets worse, where would we look to grow the business quickly and effectively in other parts of the world? And it's my most creative members of my team who are coming up with the best ideas. Next slide, please, Hanley. The area of sustainability and responsible management, every employer is now looking towards these fields of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the UN. And I'll just bring those up next, if we may, Hanley. So saving our planet now has never been more urgent and never been more important. And that has unquestionably fed through now into the job market. The media want to see socially responsible leaders. Organizations want to see socially responsible leaders. And business schools have taken on now very well the mantle of trying to make sure that the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the UN are now inculcated not just as a separate subject, sustainability and responsible management, but form a part, wherever possible, of every module taught in a business school. And I would suggest to you this, and organizations like Unilever confirm it. The CEO of Unilever have confirmed it to me. We are now actively looking for people with a responsible management mindset. And that if you don't have it, you might get a job within Unilever, but you probably won't succeed in the medium to long term. We all have a responsibility here to take these 17 SDGs and do whatever we can. And I feel very strongly that we shouldn't be leaving this just to governments and businesses, that the world of education should take a lead role in business education together with science and medicine, and perhaps arguably the most socially responsible community of them all, of these communities, to teach these such that every MBA and every business undergraduate leaves university or business school with a clear understanding of these 17 and a desire to change their organizations for the good as a result of understanding them. And what I would say is that 17 is obviously daunting. You don't need to try and make an impact either individually or with your company in all 17, but maybe just choose the 2 or 3 where you believe you can most make the biggest impact, and make those part of your daily working life and ideally daily personal life. Next point, please, Hanley. Then finally, and I come back to those inspiring 10 leaders that I interviewed and all the best business leaders I see. You need a we can do it, a Nike just do it, change the world mentality. And that's what marks out, I think, the most senior of senior leaders. You can call it persistence and resilience again, but it's a desire and passion to change the world for the better, and the resilience to take the actions to do that. And I quote the sad Ukraine example at the moment, is if that war goes on, we've come through 2 years of COVID, they happen to be record years for Amber and BGA, because we had a mentality where we're going to keep growing despite COVID probably being with us for 2 years, which of course it was. And I credit much of my team, but also particularly all our business schools around the world, including Milpark, that changed so quickly to virtual accreditations and virtual teaching, meant that we could carry on progressing as normal. A few people have said to me this week, goodness me, we've just been through 2 years of COVID and now we have this terrible, tragic war. And I said, I know, but we've coped with COVID, we'll cope with the war, because I can promise you there'll be a third global problem that comes. It's just a question of what is it and when will it come? So you need that resilience and that desire to change the world. If you do, and you have the skills to be a world changer, I believe it puts you in an audience of 1 in 100 people. Only 1 in 100 actually have that mentality in its deepest sense, I believe. Thank you. Next slide, please, Hanley. So now if we move what my experience and contacts tell me was the key skills for the future of management, what are the executive recruiters, and I speak to many, what are they looking for in 2022 and beyond in terms of the future of work? Well, the first one is, the first basic is you've got to have commercial acumen. And that may sound like a stupid thing to say, but I can assure you, an amazing number of people in business don't have commercial acumen. And when I say commercial acumen, I mean those almost entrepreneurial skills to instinctively understand what's a good business decision and what's a bad decision, what's a profitable business decision and what's a loss-making business decision. And here you're in a great position, because those of you doing a Milpark MBA or undergraduate degrees in South Africa in business, you're getting best-in-class business school training that a lot of people aren't getting. And those that don't get it have to rely on their commercial skills being developed only on the job. So you have a big advantage here. But having said that, I've met quite a lot of MBAs and intelligent MBAs who understand the theory of business, but not necessarily are that commercially practical. And the one thing I would say is, is whatever role you're in, make sure you really understand the key financial statements and the impact they have on a business. As I said, a business's biggest worry is running out of cash. And that's why if you've got great commercial acumen and you're in a senior role, you've got to watch the cash position. And that caught a lot of companies out, including bright people during COVID, when suddenly revenues trickled to almost a standstill. Next point, please, Hanley. Yeah, now, IT data and knowledge. Again, you need to ensure that you get this from your business school and that it's leading edge. I'm of an age now where as a CEO, IT is my Achilles heel, but I can buy in this expertise in managers and my head of IT below me. If you're in the 20 to 40 year age bracket and coming through on a fast track career, I think the difference now is you need the technical understanding of IT that I didn't when I was coming through. You need to understand how AI works, how to manipulate big data, and be skilled in digital marketing. Those are key skills to pick up. And unlike your commercial skills, and I'll give an example of the speed of change here. When I was at Harvard, the CEO finance courses were brilliant. But as the professor said, they hadn't largely changed the syllabus in 20 years. In IT, the syllabus needs to change every 12 months. So you really want and need to keep your IT learning seamlessly up to speed each year. Okay, next point, please. This one we've already talked about in terms of kind of persistence, but it is resilience. It's the strength of personality and the determination to manage under intense pressure on the one hand, which is exacerbated by very complex market conditions on the other. And a lot of bright people don't have this, this particular resilience. I'll always remember a senior management consultant interviewing me said, he was talking about dogs. He said, a pedigree dog is prettier, but a mongrel dog is tougher. He said, I'd go for the mongrel dog every single time over the pretty pedigree dog. And I think that analogy is never truer. Recruiters are looking for people who are tough enough, physically, of course, fitness-wise, but particularly mentally, to see through any crisis. Because the one thing I do know is after COVID and the Ukraine tragic war, there will be another major crisis at some stage in the near future, which we're all going to have to contend with. Fourth point, please, Hanley. Now, this is a key one and has become much more important amongst recruiters in the last 3 or 4 years. What candidates are doing, particularly undergraduates, but also MBAs on graduating, is they are bombing employers with mass circulation CVs. So they've got their one CV, they're changing the covering letter 50 times and sending it to 50 companies. And they're wondering why they're not hearing back. And the reason is that if you're going for top jobs, you've got to tailor make, it's time consuming, but you have to tailor make your job application to the job, or it's going to get discarded in favor of those who do. And what the wisest headhunters are saying to me is when we look at a candidate, initially electronically, a CV, we want to know, who are you? And what makes you unique or differentiates you from other job applicants? We're looking for a reason why we shouldn't put your CV, in the reject no thank you pile. And I can honestly say that since 1977, when I've recruited 1,000 people, the number of brilliant CVs I've seen, let's say 10,000 CVs to recruit 1,000 people, I can count, not on the fingers of one hand, but on the fingers of, say, 10 hands, the number of brilliantly tailored CVs. It's really rare. And if you can tailor make your CV and what makes you unique, what differentiates you from other job applicants, it will make a huge difference to your candidacy and likelihood of getting a first interview. What's key though is you've got to cleverly synchronize what it's about you that makes you unique and the best candidate to what would appeal in terms of uniqueness to the job in the organization at that moment. And that's why what I call almost CV bombing, however bright you are, just doesn't work. So think through this personal brand identity. How are you getting over the human side of you and what makes you the right person for that job? How do you do that on paper? Once you get shortlisted for a face-to-face or video interview, then the question still holds true, but you've got a chance to get that uniqueness across face-to-face. The first hurdle to overcome is how do you get that personality of yours across in an impersonal medium, i.e. on paper or via email. Next point. Thank you, Annie. Then we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, your personality type. And the ideal candidate as a leader now is persuasive, charming, and inclusive. And all the headhunters are saying this to me, but not dictatorial. And that if you haven't got those soft skills of listening and persuading and charm, it's probably one of the things where you definitely need to try and acquire them. And if necessary, adjust your personality, because they may well unfairly hold your career back. So you need to become more self-aware and work tirelessly to evolve your personality. And it probably would benefit from some one-to-one coaching, either funded a little bit by yourself or by your company, or within the support mechanism of your business school. And more business schools now are offering, particularly their MBAs, a little element of some one-to-one soft skills personality development coaching. Something I would really, really advise. Next slide, please. How we do? Okay, we're bang on time here. The next thing that is one of the biggest influences on your career, I believe now, which is great for your generation and timing, is the future of learning has changed away from 100% face-to-face to blended, and because of COVID, 100% online learning. And this is so valuable to you, because as you get your campus degrees, you should then be thinking of what I call your rest of life, lifelong learning. And I'll just explain that in the next couple of slides. Next slide, please, Hanley. So if you look at your education life cycle, probably between the age of 18 to 25, you did a 3 to 4 year undergraduate degree. Pre-COVID, almost entirely on campus. Postgraduate degrees now between roughly the ages of 22 to 35, duration anything 1 to 4 years, part on campus, part online. But then the biggest element of your business education is what I call your rest of life learning, from the age, let's say, of 30 or 35 to 70, because that's a duration of 35 to 40 years, and practically will largely be driven now through online learning in terms of time, but also in terms of cost. But this is great news for you. COVID has transformed this online learning into becoming a norm, and business schools have developed some great modules. And this will help those of you who take the trouble to develop a rest of life learning pattern. This is a huge advantage of those who think they'll just work hard in their job but muddle through with no future learning. So one of the, sorry, just go back one slide, Hanley, sorry. One of the key questions for business schools now is how can each business school, in my view, cost effectively share this year's MBA cohort learning, which they've invested very heavily in? How can they share that with their alumni of the last 1 to 30 years such that some of what's already been created for this year's MBA cohort can be shared in online learning modules for just-in-time learning for the rest of the alumni community at an effective price, which would benefit both the business school and the alumni for the next 20, 30, 40 years. And I think that's probably one of the biggest and strongest developments in business school, business graduate relationships that will come over these next few years. Next slide, please. So by way of example here, this is my experience of the 3 education establishments I went to. So I was at Dulwich College about 50 years ago, and my school, which is a good school, communicates with me once a year, and it's largely to ask for money for scholarships. There's no learning offered at all. My undergraduate degree, great Bachelor of Commerce degree at Birmingham University, a great Amber accredited MBA school too now, by the way. Birmingham communicate with me once a month. There's some thought leadership editorial content. Still, unusually, there's no learning, but that's fine. Whereas the Harvard Business School email me every single day, including Saturdays and Sundays. So they realize that now a lifelong learning relationship with their alums makes them want to communicate every single day. And you think, this is ridiculous. This is just too much. But I'm very loyal to Harvard. They gave me a great education. So I don't mind. Some of it's always asking for money, which I don't give because Harvard's the richest educational establishment in the world and far richer than I will ever be. They don't need my money, but a lot of it is very good and often free little learning chunks. And of course they're selling future programs. But ask yourself, because I asked myself, why are Harvard sending me emails every single day? They must think it's annoying. They must know it's annoying, but they're not stupid. And so they've taken the mindset of communicating with me every day. And I think that's very interesting in terms of everyone's learning going forward. Now, the 4th one I'd put down here, which I haven't put on the list, is LinkedIn, because LinkedIn communicate with me every 2 or 3 hours. Now, that really is annoying, but they're increasingly trying to sell me online learning, even when they don't really have an online learning pedigree. But it's quite interesting how business schools will need to react to the frequency of how other business schools and also non-business schools are trying to communicate with their customers, graduates, members. Thank you. Next slide, please, Hanley. So now I'd like to talk, I'm going to speed up here a little bit, talk to you about another element of employability. And there's been a view in business for many years that you're one of 2 types as a manager in business. You're either generalist, what they call a jack of all trades, but king and queen of not one trade. So for example, here you could be, you've got a good understanding of sales, marketing, operations, and finance as a generalist, or next slide, please, Hanley. You're a specialist and you're a king or a queen of one trade. You might be an absolute expert running the HR function or a genius IT leader running the IT function. And my real advice is, if you want to stand out, try and be the best of both worlds. Which is next slide, please, Hanley. Because this makes you rare. And I believe you should try and be a king or queen of 2 trades, an absolute specialist in 2 functions or disciplines, and at the same time be a jack of several trades. And so when I got my first marketing director role at Thomas Cook, I was very keen to take on commercial and be marketing and commercial director and build those 2. And that helped me get the job at Citibank Diners Club Europe as sales and marketing director. I remember Headhunter saying to me, if you can be the king or queen of 2 trades, a real specialist in 2 functions, you're automatically making yourself 1 in every 10 candidates in terms of desirability. You're increasing tenfold your attraction to an organization. And then if you can have a pretty good understanding of the general other functions, you're tailor-made to move into general management. The one thing I'd assure you of is that you don't need to be a jack of all trades in everything. And I remember one day we spent at Harvard as chief executives, which was the Harvard CEO Skills Evaluation Day. I went to Harvard, like many CEOs, with my biggest weakness as being IT. If someone made me CEO of an IT software company, it would go bust within 18 months. I'd be a disaster. So I went to Harvard full of determination. Right, I want you to make me an IT guru. And they said, no, wait a minute. Our advice to anybody who wants to build a general management career is take your weakest areas and spend your learning time getting them to an acceptable level, but no more. An acceptable level, but no more. Then spend the rest of your available learning time taking the things that you're king and queen of and making yourself even better at those, because they are what got you where you are today. The things that you're best at, certainly not the things you're worst at. So just get the things you're weakest at to an acceptable level, but no more, and then focus on your strengths. And I thought that was really useful advice from Harvard when I was there 20 years ago. And those have been the building blocks of my career. So I've got my IT to an okay level, and then made sure I've recruited some very smart IT people to work for me. Okay, I'm mindful that we want time for questions, so I'm going to move on quickly to the last 3 slides, if I may. Yeah, so this one, in terms of your career progression, is even 10 years ago, if you were ambitious, your role from assistant to executive to manager, and if you wanted to be director, CEO to chair, was largely a logical vertical ladder. And it has now become increasingly a much more complex, but actually a much richer career opportunity mosaic. And it requires more thoughtful, meticulous planning. And the one thing I would say here is what you're trying to do is plan the learning that you need to reflect the skills you haven't got that you'll need in the next job that you really want. So try and build the two in harmony. And don't, even if you've got a great boss and a great head of HR, don't rely on anyone but yourself to build your own career. Just like your own health, you are primarily responsible for your career and nobody else. I think it's quite useful to realize sometimes. Don't rely on your company to build your career for you. Penultimate slide, please, Hanley. Okay, I know that many of you either work for multinational corporations or would like to work for them, either within South Africa or Southern Africa or overseas. And so just speaking to multinational HR directors, my latest message on these is as follows. Point 1, in the 2020s, there's now a much greater focus on recruiting in country. Secondly, the reason for that primarily is it's much lower cost than continuing to relocate expats from overseas. Thirdly, quite rightly, in terms of responsible management, it's politically and socially much more desirable to recruit locally and give in-country young staff and managers the chance to lead the companies. So you get greater diversity in senior management and greater equality. And then point 4, this is one that a lot of the major multinationals have worked for and understood from bad experience, that particularly if you're in tough markets, local senior managers who are used to the culture and understand the local marketplace are much more likely to stay than some expats who can't hack it and want to go home and they can't last the course, and you're much more likely to succeed. So so if that's what multinationals are doing, it may be ironically harder to go overseas, but it may give you better opportunities within a multinational. And I would advise to take things step by step. if you want to work overseas, number one, make sure you're working for an organization in international markets. Number two, maybe try and get a job within the region of, so perhaps try and get a job in Southern Africa rather than South Africa, and then see if you can springboard from there. But I would also add one more thing. Be smart and realize where the multinational jobs are in your continent, and maybe learn one of those languages. And I think it's well worth considering for any bright African to learn Mandarin, because it's a tough language to learn. And if you look at the growth of China in Africa and indeed in Asia, it's a rare skill to have, to be able to speak conversational Mandarin. I think it's a really good investment in time. And then the final slide, which will leave us a few minutes for questions. Probably a personal thing that you're all considering now is, should you stay with your current organization or should you leave? And I've kind of got a checklist, which I think is a logical way of working this through. Starting with the point, remember, the grass is always greener the other side of the garden fence. It always seems more attractive to move sometimes than in reality it may be. Remember, a headhunter regards you as a check on legs. They're not necessarily wanting to put you in a better job. They're wanting to fulfill a job and get paid for it. So they want to put candidates in jobs, sometimes, not always, when it might not be in your interest. So first question, number one, is, do you like your industry? Because you've probably spent quite a lot of time gaining knowledge in it. Point two, Hanley. Do you like your organization's culture and colleagues? Very, very important. Are you happy there with the work environment? And, you know, not do you like everyone, but do you get on well with your boss, and do you get on well with quite a lot of your peer group? You know, and in honesty, that's much rarer, number two, than people perhaps realize. Point three, Hanley. You know, is there still room to grow in the organization you're in? Are you still learning new skills and experiences? If you speak to HR, can you learn more experiences going forward? Point four, Hanley. Then fourthly, can you see career progression for yourself? And if you can't see it, have an honest conversation with your boss, or even, providing you're careful and diplomatic, your boss's boss, who may be aware of opportunities that your own boss isn't, particularly if there are opportunities that will come up in the next 12 months but aren't public yet. And then fourthly, talk to HR and training and development, because they are the people who will need to recruit for those jobs. And then finally, does your remuneration, both what you earn now and what you're led to believe you'll earn in future, meet your own, and I put this in brackets, but it's important, your own realistic expectations? We all have a tendency sometimes to think we're worth more than we really are. But if you benchmark your salary against your industry norms, are you overpaid and underpaid? Will the organization rectify that? And is there a career ladder that meets your current and future needs? My personal experience over all these years, over 45 years in business, is if you can tick 3 of those boxes, and ideally 4, think very carefully about leaving, because the grass may not necessarily be greener on the other side of the fence, and you've got to prove yourself all over again. And then finally, I would say that you're in a great position. You're being educated at a great organization. You're already a rare breed and have an advantage over the market. And it doesn't matter whether you leave or whether you go. You are a good candidate, and a future employer wants to see loyalty. They don't want to see what I call a butterfly CV, which is where someone's fluttered from company to company, but never stayed and achieved a track record. And so if you're good and you are a talented group of people, you'll be fine. Don't worry about staying too long at your existing organization if you can tick 3 or more of those boxes. Okay, I hope some of that has been helpful. Over to you, Cobus.
Awesome. Andrew, thank you so much. You've given us so much to internalize and to digest and to reflect on. You know, the wonderful flow of your conversation and the practical examples based on your own life, your own journey. And it's fascinating. I was just thinking the people that you've had the privilege to personally engage with, all the countries you've been to. And then, I'm sitting here, I'm thinking, wow, there's a large part of my upbringing it seemed that I've seemed to have missed, but that's your story, and it's wonderful. But Andrew, you've taken us through, some of the key skills of persistence, that of inspirational leadership style, the complex problem solving, the creativity, the responsible management, and that change the world mentality. And when I thought about this, how strong the message of mindset came through in all of this, even in your own, your personal journey through everything, and the inspiration that you've drawn from others, absolutely, but your own, your own mindset, and with the complex world that we find ourselves in, and probably going to get even more complex. How do you stay? And you also refer to resilience later on, but that persistence, that grit, that never say die type of attitude. Andrew, there's one question in the question box from Roslyn. Thank you for an inspiring session. What legacy will you leave behind, Andrew? And is your wealth of knowledge passed on into a mentor group?
It's a really good question. I try and pass on whatever wisdom I can to as many people as I can. So when I came back from Harvard and the CEO program, I took the Harvard program and condensed it into learning modules and shared it with all my directors and senior managers at the organization I was currently. So as you get older, it's really, you really want to try and share that knowledge. I try and do presentations like this as much as I can. I do a series for Nikon called Andrew Main Wilson's World of Wonders, where I share the travel story. So I try and share those things. Just in answer to your question on resilience, how do you build that resilience? If some of you have had some really bad experiences in life, that's a great thing to increase your resilience. When I was 46, so 16 years ago, I was suddenly completely out of the blue diagnosed with bowel cancer and told that I only had less than 3 weeks to live. It was the 12th of October and they told me I'd be dead by the end of the month. And I had a massive operation and went through chemotherapy, and nearly dying, a bad experience, which was frightening, made me much more resilient, because once you've nearly died and survived, nothing else seems quite as bad again. So don't worry that your bad experiences in life have affected you badly. Funnily enough, the learning from them has probably made you a much better person and a much stronger person.
Absolutely. I can just concur now. In our life journeys, it's not always tar road. We often also drive off-road and very rugged terrain, but that all contributes to our shaping and our forming. But Andrew, now I know there's a lot of these resilience courses as well, and it's included in many curricula, it's in syllabi, etc. In your view, do you think something like resilience can be taught?
I do. I think that some resilience comes from your knowledge and experience base.
Yeah.
So the more knowledgeable you are from your job and your career learning in your business school, the better you're able to cope with the problem, and the less likely you are to be stressed. Because stress becomes dangerous, particularly if it's negative stress. Positive stress is a good thing because it motivates you to do things. Negative stress makes people ill and makes people panic. And what you don't want to be doing is making tough business decisions in panic mode.
Absolutely.
And I've seen that before. So I think the more knowledgeable you are from your career, the more resilient you'll be. Can you change someone's personality fundamentally in terms of the character in them?
Yeah.
That's a tougher question.
Yeah.
I
No,
think
but
only to a degree.
yeah. No, but I absolutely agree with you. I think if a learning environment can be created where it's immersive and it's experiential, where you involve all three modes, the head, the heart, and the hands, I'm convinced that you can shift a person's growth in terms of resilience and so forth. There's one more question from Laura. Andrew, how do you see business education's future? Should we change it in South Africa?
Well, I mean, you're in the great position of having, if you take Africa as a continent, probably 16 of the top 20 business schools are in South Africa, and you've got world-class schools. So you're in a good position. I think the biggest change will be not so much the degree programs themselves, because you're moving curriculum content very well, with the times. It's what you do and the big opportunity for every alum from the age of 22 to 70 in terms of bite-sized online learning. It's a huge opportunity for the school, and it's a huge opportunity for the graduate. And that's where the world will change most. Because if you looked at the life cycle of any product, and someone said, well, take education, the life cycle of the product of education, the life cycle of the consumer is from 4 years old to 70.
Yeah.
Everyone's focused on the bit between 18 and 25.
Yeah.
That's when typically you do degrees, or 18 and 35 if you do an MBA. Everyone has neglected the need to keep learning beyond your natural degree courses. And that's where the biggest opportunity lies, both for the customer and the business school supplier, in my view. That will bring the biggest change.
Absolutely. I agree with that wholeheartedly, purely because and thanks to Amber, we're always in the know, with global trends and the developments and things in the management education space. So Andrew, thank you for that comments. Colleagues, any more questions? All right. Fantastic, inspiring, etc. Andrew, it doesn't seem like there's any other questions here, and it doesn't matter that we've run out of time. You've given us so much. I've got the evening ahead of me over here in South Africa to digest a lot of what you've said. And it doesn't matter where any one of us are in our life journeys, whether you're at 28 or whether you're at 60, there is something for each one of us in what Andrew has shared with us here this evening. So just really an honor having you, Andrew. Thank you again so much. And the webinar or the presentation would also be recorded, so our visitors would be able to access it again if they want to look through it again. But to you and your team, thank you also for your support to us as a business school, and we really appreciate your insights as well from your personal life. Thank you so much, Andrew. Appreciate it.
Pleasure. I look forward to coming down and visiting you all guys personally.
Absolutely. Yeah, of course.
We'll be able to travel. Next time I'm down in South Africa, I'll definitely call in and see you guys. Be wonderful.
Absolutely. We'll have a glass of wine in the shades of Table Mountain.
Sounds right.
Andrew, thank you so much. Take care, colleagues. Thank you for visiting.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for joining.